Imagine a brotherly bond so profoundly shattered that even speaking the other's name feels like an act of absolute betrayal. A boundary so unyielding and rigid that inside the private, history-lined chambers of Kensington Palace, one specific name has been completely erased from daily existence. For years, the global public has watched the highly publicized fallout between Prince William and Prince Harry. The leaks, the interviews, the memoirs, and the subtle snubs on the balcony of Buckingham Palace. But behind the heavy oak doors, away from the flashing cameras of the international press, a far more chilling and permanent reality has taken over the daily lives of the working royals. According to senior palace sources and highly placed courtiers, Prince William has instituted a strict, unbreakable, and unspoken rule within his entire household. Harry's name is never to be uttered in his presence. Not by the dedicated staff who manage his daily schedule, not by his closest constitutional advisors, and not even in passing during casual family conversations. It is as if the Duke of Sussex has been systematically wiped from the future king's reality. By the end of this deep dive documentary, you will discover the exact moment Prince William took this silent vow, the explosive behind-the-scenes arguments at Windsor that triggered this ultimate emotional shutdown, and why this absolute silence is not just a sign of anger, but a calculated warning for the very survival of the British monarchy. But before we reveal the hidden truths buried deep within the palace archives, let me ask you a question that is currently dividing royal commentators across the globe. Do you believe Prince William is entirely justified in completely cutting off his brother to protect the sanctity of the crown? Or is this cold, uncompromising silence tearing the royal family apart beyond any hope of future repair? Drop your detailed thoughts in the comments below right now. We read every single one, and this is a debate that will shape the modern era of the monarchy. And make sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the intricate operational details we are about to share have never been covered in this depth anywhere else on the internet. Let us take you back to the exact flashpoint where the Brotherhood died and the silence began. To truly comprehend why the Prince of Wales chose the path of absolute, unwavering silence, we must look back at the private continuity exercises that took place within the walls of Windsor Castle months before the current transition structure was finalized. The public sees the royal family as a symbol of permanent stability, but behind the scenes, it operates as a high-stakes institution where discipline, loyalty, and emotional control are tested constantly. King Charles had arranged a series of private strategy meetings, referred to by insiders as continuity rehearsals, designed to test how the senior members of the family would react under extreme constitutional pressure, specifically if the monarch suddenly became unable to fulfill his public duties due to escalating health struggles. Prince William entered these gatherings prepared to show absolute loyalty to his father's vision for a streamlined, modernized monarchy. He believed the exercise was a standard constitutional procedure. However, the atmosphere inside the grand halls quickly grew thick with unspoken rivalries and deep-seated fears about the future. When a senior court official raised the critical question of who would wield definitive authority if the king's health forced a sudden slowdown, the room fractured. Queen Camilla, fiercely protective of her position and the stability of the current reign, asserted that no major transition decisions should be executed without her explicit approval. William remained entirely silent out of sheer respect for his father, refusing to engage in a public dispute inside the council chamber. But that silence was deeply misunderstood by some in the room as hesitation. Princess Catherine, observing the interaction, saw the immediate danger. She understood that leaving succession boundaries undefined would allow rival factions and outside pressures to build influence around the future king before he was even ready to defend his own position. Later that evening, in a private side chamber, King Charles confronted William about his lack of assertion. William's response was simple yet profound. He would never fight for authority while his father was still standing. His words carried profound loyalty, but they also exposed the vulnerability of the family's internal dynamic. But while internal palace politics created tension, it was Prince Harry's public actions that pushed William to his absolute breaking point. The release of the explosive memoir Spare was not merely a media event. For William, it was an unforgivable violation of the sacred trust that had protected the brotherhood since childhood. The book did not just critique the institution of the monarchy, it detailed deeply personal, private family altercations. It described physical altercations between the two brothers within the private walls of Nottingham Cottage. More critically, it thrust Princess Catherine into the global media spotlight, portraying her in a manner that William felt was entirely unfair and malicious. For a man who values privacy above all else, seeing his wife and children's lives dissected for global entertainment was the final straw. The day the memoir was published, the old dynamic died forever. William realized that any word spoken to Harry, any shared confidence, or any emotional vulnerability could be documented, packaged, and sold to the highest bidder. The silence was born not out of simple anger, but out of a desperate need for absolute institutional security. To understand the psychology behind William's silent vow, one must look at how he was raised and the historical weight he carries as the future king. From the moment of his birth, William's life has been defined by protocol, duty, and the understanding that he will one day inherit the ultimate responsibility of the state. He grew up watching his mother, Princess Diana, struggle intensely with the invasive nature of the media, and he watched his father, Charles, internalize family conflicts quietly, often letting the stress affect his personal well-being. William resolved early on that he would approach leadership differently. He would be decisive. He would set clear, unyielding boundaries. When Harry made the choice to step back from royal duties and establish a completely independent life in California, William initially attempted to maintain a professional distance. But as the interviews continued, culminating in the Netflix docuseries and global television appearances, William realized that traditional diplomacy was entirely ineffective against modern media strategies. Every time the palace issued a polite standard statement, it was picked apart by commentators and weaponized by the Sussex camp. William concluded that the only way to win a war of narratives was to refuse to participate in it entirely. Inside his private household, the ban on Harry's name became an operational necessity. Palace staff members report that if a briefing document mentions a media move by the Sussexes, the section is highlighted in red and handled strictly by legal and public relations teams. It never reaches William's desk. By erasing the name from daily discourse, William successfully removed the emotional trigger from his workspace. He could focus entirely on state papers, meetings with political leaders, and preparing his eldest son, Prince George, for his historic future role, without being constantly pulled back into a cycle of family trauma. Princess Catherine's role in maintaining this boundary cannot be overstated. Throughout the years of public hostility, Catherine has chosen the path of absolute, dignified silence. She has not given defensive interviews. She has not leaked counter-narratives to friendly journalists. Instead, she has focused heavily on her early childhood development programs and mental health initiatives, earning immense public respect and historic approval ratings that frequently outpace the rest of the family. Her middle-class background, which was once subtly mocked by old-school courtiers as too common, has become the monarchy's most vital connection to ordinary British life. She provides William with the emotional anchor he needs to remain grounded. When the palace walls feel suffocating and the pressure of the approaching crown becomes immense, Catherine is the one who steadies him, ensuring that their children do not inherit the systemic anxiety that has plagued the Windsor line for generations. As King Charles's health continues to fluctuate, forcing a phased transfer of selected state duties, Prince William's approach to leadership is becoming increasingly visible to constitutional experts and engaging directly with young Commonwealth leaders to understand their modern perspectives. He recognizes that clinging desperately to outdated symbolic power structures will only accelerate their total collapse. By building relationships based on mutual respect, shared interests, and transparency, William is quietly rewriting the rulebook of British foreign policy, ensuring that the crown continues to matter in a deeply skeptical, modern world. Yet, despite William's ironclad focus on the future, the ghost of the past still haunts the corridors of the palace. King Charles, whose reign has been tragically overshadowed by severe health battles and the immense legacy of his mother, holds a profoundly different view on the family divide. As a father who spent his entire life waiting to wear the crown, Charles knows all too well how deeply the institution can isolate a person. According to those closest to the monarch, Charles spends his rare private evenings reviewing old family photographs from happier times. Pictures of two young boys playing together in the gardens of Highgrove, entirely oblivious to the heavy golden weights that would one day pull them apart. Charles does not wish for Harry to be fully reinstated as a working royal. He knows that is logistically and politically impossible. But his final, deepest royal wish is for family healing. He desires a slight opening, a tiny fracture in the wall of silence where communication might one day begin again before his time on this earth runs out. The king has quietly maintained a private line of communication with Harry through highly trusted intermediaries, shielding these interactions from the rest of the family to avoid triggering further internal strife. Charles firmly believes that blood ties carry a cosmic responsibility that cannot simply be erased by geographic distance or public disagreements. This delicate conflict reached a dramatic head during a secret meeting summoned at Windsor Castle. With the king too weakened by his medical treatments to endure intense emotional stress, he tasked his sister, Princess Anne, with delivering his final message to his sons. Anne, widely respected across all factions of the royal family for her blunt honesty and absolute lack of pretense, conveyed the king's wish not as an emotional plea, but as a matter of ultimate institutional duty. She stood before William in the private chamber, her posture rigid, and delivered the words Charles had spent countless sleepless nights drafting. The room held its breath as the message was delivered. It was a direct challenge to William's strategy of absolute erasure. For Charles, a divided family represents a profound weakness that will permanently stain his legacy. But for William, breaking the silence means letting the chaos back inside the gates. The future king sat in absolute silence as his aunt spoke, his face hardening into stone. He did not argue, He did not object out of respect for his father's messenger, but his body language said everything. The silent vow remained unbroken. The dynamic had shifted fundamentally. The power to decide Harry's future status no longer belonged to the reigning king. It had passed completely into the hands of the brother who had been pushed too far. As the clock ticks relentlessly toward the confirmed coronation date of November 14th, 2026, the British monarchy stands on the precipice of its most significant transformation in generations. The transition schedule is no longer a distant plan. It has become a fixed countdown, turning every daily meeting, every red box briefing, and every public appearance into a step toward a new era. Power is moving through the palace corridors like a quiet tide, shifting steadily from the hands of a compromised father to the absolute control of a decisive son. Behind the ancient stone walls, royal advisors continue to debate the long-term consequences of William's uncompromising stance. Some urge him to honor his father's final wish, warning that permanently closing the door on Harry will generate massive public sympathy for the Sussexes, creating a permanent dark narrative that will overshadow the early years of his own reign. They remind him that historically, deeply divided royal families have always left the institution vulnerable to external criticism. But those closest to the future king report an unwavering confidence in his judgment. William is entirely willing to make the difficult, painful choices required to ensure the absolute stability of the crown. He knows that a modern monarchy cannot survive if it is constantly fighting internal media wars. The silence surrounding Prince Harry is no longer just a private boundary. It has become the foundational cornerstone of the next reign. It is a clear, unyielding message to the world that under King William V, duty will entirely consume personal emotion, and loyalty to the institution will override the bonds of blood. The choice now rests entirely with one man. Will William find the grace to honor his father's final wish for a slight family reconciliation? Or will he firmly, permanently lock the heavy iron doors that Harry walked through all those years ago? The answer to that question will not just define the internal dynamics of a broken family. It will shape the public perception, the legitimacy, and the ultimate survival of the British monarchy for the next century to come.